Good morning and welcome to Santos on Sports alongside Chris Santos. I am Paul Santos. Oh, we got some big time hockey talk for you today. And when we decide to do hockey talk, we go right to the Encyclopedia of Hockey. That's
Mick
what one of my
Santos.
friends said about this gentleman. Say hello to longtime sports writer and covering the Bruins since, Phil Esposito and Bobby Orr. Mick Colageo. Mick, great to see you. Welcome in.
Well, let's in the interest of full disclosure, I did go to games back then, but I wasn't in the press. I didn't cover the Bruins until 91-92 season.
All right, but I know you've been a fan for a long time, like myself, going back to the old days of the black and gold. Before we get into your career and all that, just tell me one thing, okay? Just tell me one thing. Is there a way for the Bruins to win the Stanley Cup as an outside dark horse? Just tell me there's a way. Please tell me there's a way.
You got to defend on the left side. They have not solved this since Zdeno Chara aged out. They had a golden opportunity when Jeff Gorton wrote that letter on behalf of the New York Rangers saying, we're going to tank now and empty out everything we got so we can rebuild you a brand new contender, which they've done a hell of a job doing over there. And then they kicked them aside, and now Chris Drury's running the show. But one of the things the Bruins did at the 2018 deadline was get Rick Nash. You already got Marchand, you already got Pasternak. You need another elite winger. What you needed was a left side shutdown defenseman. They also got rid of Ryan McDonough, letting him come into the division and not get him on your team. Double whammy, set up the Lightning. They became a big three team, a la New Jersey, Stevens, Niedermeyer, and either Danica or Rafalski, depending on the era. Robinson, Lapointe, Savard, they're the big three of that's the model that they won with. Even the Blues did it with Pietrangelo, Parayko, and Baumeister. The Bruins couldn't get inside on those guys. And this is how they won. And this is what the Bruins had an opportunity to change their model from the two number one center model that prevailed in the 90s with the great Western Conference teams like Modano, Neuendijk in Dallas, obviously Sakic, Forsberg in Colorado, and Yzerman, Fedorov in Detroit, and Crosby, Malkin, Bergeron, Krejci. That's the model that they have been. Even when the Capitals won it in 18, Backstrom, Kuznetsov. When Kuznetsov stopped being a passenger in the playoffs, they won. That became an elite team, and I think that they could do it again if they just fill out the defense a little bit. I think the Capitals are a sleeper here. Bruins, the Krejci era being over, Bergeron being 36 years old, the team is overloaded with wings. You could compare that part of it to Chicago, but Chicago had its big three with Duncan Keith, Nicholas Hjalmarsson anchoring the second pairing, and Brett Seabreg was like their Johnny Boychuk. So they had a big three as well, and that's how they won it. And that was the basis of their team. Judge Surratt will tell you this. He covered the Blackhawks for years before coming to Boston to call the Bruins on radio. So there's two models that you have to have. I'm not saying it guarantees anything. Kopitar and the guy who now plays for Pittsburgh. You got to have either two number one centers or a big three defense. And
all right.
One of those has to be the deal. And the Bruins are one player away from that big three defense. So the other one they could have gotten is Ekholm from Nashville when Poyle made him available at the beginning of last season when the Predators were in trouble. That was another opportunity. You don't get that player, you can't win, period.
All right.
Mick, I can agree with that. I think depth is something that's very big, especially on the defensive line. And we've watched the Bruins this year play some real good hockey against like Nashville. Won a nice game the other night against Colorado. Looked pretty solid, which is great for a one game. It's a matter of can that depth, and playoff hockey is a lot tighter than regular season hockey. So the depth to come out and let's say, games of 5 or games of 7, can the Bruins handle that? That's what's pretty big. So if they make some kind of move, if they can on defense to strengthen that up, what do you think that Sweeney and them might be able to do? And do you like what the moves they've made during the season? Which means now I take Pasternak, I move him down to the second line. I put the Brusque up the other night, scored 2 goals. Is this something that they're going to probably stick with? What do you see coming up?
I was just thinking about this the other night. Jake DeBrusk, for every spike of a couple, 2, 3 good games, impactful games. Let's put it that way. He has played some good games this year where, ironically, one of them was right before his healthy scratch the same night as Eric Haula that precipitated the trade request. He was actually playing pretty good up and down the wall, winning pucks, getting them in, getting them out, winning his share of battles. I was thinking, wow, DeBrusk is not playing bad right now. I don't care if the puck goes in with this guy. He's actually he's pulling the rope. And then lo and behold, they put him upstairs. I'm thinking, why now? And the answer that Cassidy gave was, well, the puck's got to start going in sometime. I'm thinking, really, of all this time that's gone by, he's played so many passenger games that you decide now. They know exactly how well that guy was playing at that point. I don't think that was Cassidy's decision. I think that probably came from over his head, and I think that that lesser trained eyes made that decision, and I think that resulted in the trade request, and I think they're in a hole here, and they got to get rid of him, and I hope they do it right now while the value's at its highest. That's what they need to do there.
All right, let's talk about goaltending. Of course, they had the Tuukka Rask experiment. And so you have the pro Tuukka crew, and you have the sort of like the anti Tuukka crew.
He thought it was going to ruin Swayman, right? And it didn't.
Yeah, well,
he's playing very well.
Yeah, so I want to ask you two things. Number one, I mean, it's easy to say in retrospect. Was it a good idea to give Rask a shot to come back, given the fact that, you really do need that sort of like number one goalie kind of thing to win the cup? Or B, would have been better off just to stick with what you have? And by the way, can a Swayman get hot? The old young goalie getting hot routine. It's not like we haven't seen that before. Does Swayman have what it takes to, deliver what needs to be delivered over 4 rounds of playoffs?
When Swayman first played for the Bruins at the end of last season, I got the same vibe I got when I saw McAvoy entered on emergency against the Ottawa Senators in the 17 playoffs. He was supposed to play out that season in Providence and play at least half of the next one in Providence. And instead, they needed him because of injuries. They forced him in, wondering how is he going to do. And it's like 10 minutes into it, you realize, what were we thinking? This guy's here. He's now. We're not looking back on this. I felt the same way about Swayman's performance. I don't disagree with the Bruins' patient, methodical, by-the-book development attitude toward that, nor do I think that they were wrong about Rask. I think that I'm a Rask fan. I've always loved Tuukka, and I don't think that he's ever going to win over some people until he wins, and that we now know that's never going to happen. So his legacy is now cemented, which is tragic in his case, because there's always going to be people who say, he was just a stats guy. He didn't really he left you at the altar, blah, 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 blah. I just don't buy it. I look at different reasons of why they lost. I think the goaltending saved their buttskis many times, getting, to the points where people say he left them at the altar. They wouldn't have gotten there without him. So I'm not a detractor of Tuukka's, and I'm disappointed. I'm a little surprised that it fell apart the way it did, given how much time he took and all of that. But I guess the other parts of the body just acted up and told him, no, you can't do this anymore. And he had to just face the music, which is tough that soon into the process. That was really weird and hard to process, but apparently it just is the way it worked out, and it's tough on him. But the Bruins, I know how many people are saying now they shouldn't have invested in Allmark, and now saying that, that contract, they want to make sure they had a good bridge to Swayman. I think they did everything by the book. And right now, could you have a lower cap hit in net? Yeah, you could if you gambled. But why would a team like that make such an unreasonable gamble? So I think they did what they did. Is it the ideal situation, paying Allmark what they're paying him? No, but it served them very well this year. If you looked at the performances and where they are right now and why they are where they are, the goaltending's been good.
So that being said, Mick, second half of the season now is playing out. Allmark got the start the other night. Is Cassidy now going to start thinking, hey, I want to solidify my goaltending, and let's go like 4 games with Swayman, 1 with Allmark, 4 games with Swayman, 1? Are they going to keep doing 2 and 2 and 2 and 2 back and forth? And then who's got the hot hand going into the playoffs? How do you see that developing at the end?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Chris. And I think we've already seen part of that evolution during the season. This is the second time that Swayman's been given the ball and told, well, go ahead, run with it. Let's see how you do. And then, on one of those prior occasions, the bottom kind of fell out. It wasn't on him, but it did. And you had to go back to Ullmark, and Ullmark played pretty well. And you wound up getting some games, and Swayman was in the minors, and the whole thing with Tuca happened. And then Swayman, wasn't quite on top of his game when he first got back, but he quickly got back, and now they're giving him the ball again and saying, run with it. So Ullmark's going to sprinkle in his games. And if you notice a little bit of role reversal earlier in the season, Ullmark got the tough assignments, and Swayman got we're going to put you in a position to be successful, to borrow the old Mike Sullivan cliche. That's what happened with Swayman early in the season. The other night they did that with Ullmark.
All right, if you have any questions from Mick Colageo, we're talking to him, a longtime sports writer covering hockey and the Boston Bruins. Give us a shout. You see the number at the bottom of the screen there, 774-301-9432. It's always fun to jump in and talk sports like we do here on Santos on Sports. Well, I've heard a few observers say, well, the Bruins, not only the issues that you talked about before, but, they don't play a heavy game enough. They're not gritty enough. They're not too quick to drop the gloves. They're not too quick to, maybe slash a guy when the referee's not looking, or, clear people out in front of the net and stuff like that. And then I think, well, that used to be the way you won a cup years ago, like the New York Islanders come to mind. And, when you go back to old time hockey, the game seems to be more faster, seems to be more about speed, seems to be more about skill. But is there an element of that game? I mean, when they won in 2011, they had that sort of that thing with Lucic and Sean Thornton. I mean, is that something that you really need now to win the Stanley Cup? And are they lacking in that area?
Yes and yes. I don't think they're that far off, though. I do like the trend. I know people are down on Foligno because he hardly ever scores a goal, and oh God, we re-signed David Backes here. We've done the same mistake over again. Another bad free agent, Bolesky. That's won that one. Ronaldo, and you got. I like Foligno. I like his personality. I don't think it hurts his ego at all to play on any line and help the team however he can. For a good portion of this season, he was the only guy going to the net. And he was like trying to drag everyone else into the fight. And Marchand, obviously, in the top line, does the same thing with the way he brilliantly reinvents the game of hockey as his career has moved along. But Foligno in the bottom six or even bottom nine has been the one guy who's consistently played that way. So I don't undervalue Foligno. Do I think that it's a bit of a Marty LaPointe contract? Yeah, but clearly they wanted to get him here. I don't think this is a one-man job either. I don't believe in cop hockey that you need one guy to protect your stars like Semenko on Gretzky, or I think that this is a culture. You're talking about the 11 Bruins here. You're talking about a resurgence of on the back line. You had it too with Boychuk. He didn't take any crap. McQuaid and Chara. I mean, Seidenberg wasn't a fighter, but he was a beast of a player. So you gotta go. And Ferentz was no choir boy. So really, the culture was pervaded throughout the team. Everybody was nasty on that team. There were very few gaps in that, and you don't have to have even the late 70s Bruins. Jean Rattel, here's a perennial Lady Byng candidate who's your top line center on a great hockey team, and yet that might be the toughest hockey team of all time. So it doesn't mean that everybody has to play a certain way. You have room for players to be who they are, but you got to have a culture in your team that responds and takes ice, puts their foot down, like Claude used to say, strong on our sticks, claim space. Sometimes the playoffs is 5 feet at a time, and you win those puck battles. Look what the Islanders did to the Bruins last year. Even the smaller guys like Palmieri just played right through the Bruins. And that's what the Bruins have to continue accenting. And the next acquisition has to be that way. It doesn't have to be a rowdy specialist. It has to be a guy who pervades the middle of the culture of the club. They have to inch their way that way. They've been doing it a little bit since 19 when they got out toughed. The Blues did it to them again. And they were more like the 2011 Bruins, and the Bruins more like the 11 Canucks in that series. That's, in fact, if you even look at Game 7, the Bruins pepper their net for 10 minutes, and then And then who comes down the ice and scores that one goal, and then it's good night, everybody. The heavy team won, and the heavy teams continue to win. Teams that are not heavy don't win the cup. If you even look at Pittsburgh in 16 and 17, Phil Kessel became a Wolverine on the boards, just getting pucks in. He was getting his butt kicked over there, but he was doing it. He was taking the hits. He was making plays. He was playing the hard hockey, and he became a real part of that team when they won in those 2 years, and that especially the first of those 2 years. And I felt really happy for Phil the Thrill that he did that, in his career in that moment. But then he could experience the joy of going to war and understanding what it's like to be part of a team that really does it and played through the game like that.
Well, Mick, we've seen it since the 70s. They were known as the Big Bad Bruins, the lunch pail kind of guys that go to work and grind and all that. Is that typical player still out there for Boston to go get and find somebody in free agency or trades or whatever it is to say, yeah, this guy has that kind of mentality that the Big Bad Bruins used to, instill in a player? Is there someone there that they can say, yeah, we'll take a guy like that and we'll use him? I know there's Coyle and Smith and some of these other guys that they've gotten in, but do you see that coming up for the Bruins in some ways? Is someone out there to say, hey, he fits our Bruins system?
Yeah, I guess what has to happen here is the Bruins need to decide what their DNA is, and I know that Craig Smith really sort of embodies what that DNA has been for the last few years. Just second and third effort hockey, frenzied energy, and that you play both sides of the puck, you play it hard, but there's nothing in Craig Smith's game that intimidates anybody as far as the physicality element of the game. No defenseman is scared to go back on the puck with Craig Smith coming. They know that they might get hit, but they're going to get hit clean, and they're going to get hit within the confines of a hockey play. And in all likelihood, they don't need to worry about how they're going to get hit. That was different 10 years ago with the Bruins. They weren't dirty, but they were menacing. And I think that Foligno was an attempt to try to inject some of that, developing Frederick patiently and trying to bring him along. And I think he's been pretty good lately, actually. And giving Bleed a chance after all these years to be part of this. I do like some of that bottom six stuff. I'm a Lazar fan. I'd like to see him win the seventh player. But I do think that up higher in the lineup, I'd like to see more of that accented. I'd like to see DeBrusk moved, and I'd like to see whoever they get be a little more rough around the edges and the shoulders, to be a little harder, even if it comes at the expense of DeBrusk's elite speed and elite hands.
All right, 774-301-9432. We're talking to Mick Colageo, who is a longtime sports writer, focusing in on hockey and the Boston Bruins for many years, and we're getting his take on the Boston Bruins and really the NHL in general. But, focusing on the Bruins roster, Patrice Bergeron, final year of his contract, 37 years old, I believe he is, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of people are speculating, what's he going to do? Is he going to leave? Is he going to stay? Is he going to do the old one-year contract thing like Chara? What is the level of his game right now? And maybe based on your contacts or anything that you've heard being around the team and stuff like that, what are we likely to see from Patrice Bergeron next year, for example, or in the next couple of years?
I got to say, I really don't know. I wish I had a better beat on this, because I never really gave it much question until Krejci left. And I always did feel like Krejci was, I didn't believe anything about, they're going to sign Krejci. You watch, you'll see. No, I really thought Krejci was going to go, and he did. But I didn't really give much thought to how Bergeron, until they reshaped the Bruins locker room after the 19 finals, they redid it into like that modern day egg shape, where every player can see every other player. Before that, and the Bruins was a rectangular locker room, Bergeron and Krejci were kitty corner. And even though they were never on the ice together, unless they pulled the goalie at the end of a game, they always sat right next to each other in that room. And I always considered it a really weird parallel that these two guys who hardly ever see the ice together are so brilliant two-way hockey players with their own personality and their own set of skills that they have. Bergeron has constantly evolved Don Sweeney said something really interesting about him during media day a few years ago, that Bergeron never stops trying to figure out how to be a better player. So for me, I think that that's going to be a big factor in him deciding that there's more left. He's only had, a little bit of time wearing this C. They haven't really. He hasn't really. Still a lot of unfinished business when he looks down at that letter on his sweater. I'd like to think he's going to stick around because I feel like he continues to figure out. Whereas a lot of guys who are like, you take like a guy like Bobby Ryan or DeBrusk, they're great at sizing up what a hockey game looks like from the bench. And then they might only get 12 or 15 or 17 minutes maybe, but average 15. And to look out there and to say, okay, I'm going to be out here this many shifts. What do I see? And they try to surprise the game, pounce on the game, make that one impactful moment. Patrice Bergeron is like Raymond Bourque as a center. He's in the game. He is the game. He decides what the game is, what the terms of the game are. He plays through the middle of the game. He is from A to Z. He's in the middle of the hockey game. And yet he is constantly sizing it up and deciding, what do I need to be? Who thought he was going to be a one-timer on a power play this far into his career? That wasn't in his game 10 years ago or 15. No way. This is something that he worked on, not because he said, I want to be a 40-goal scorer someday. He did it because he thought this will help the Bruins win. And this is what we need. So I'm going to try to do this. And he got good enough at it to do it. And so that's Bergeron in a nutshell. And right now,
has his game dropped off at all, Mick, do you think?
I think it looks like that at times. I really thought the last few years when he was dealing with his groin pull that his game had dropped off a little bit. But I feel like right now, I think that the groin issue is behind him. And I think that what we see more of is that he has a rambunctious winger who's elite in Brad Marchand, who would take the puck from behind his own net all the way and try to go around everybody like he's playing at his neighborhood pond. I mean, it's like Marchand does. He does during the early parts of the season. He's terrible at it, and he gives up turnovers and goals against like a machine. But he all the time, Marchand's taking little data points. And then when it comes to late in the season, when it matters, he starts just absolutely killing everybody. And Bergeron is kind of like the big brother who just sort of is like on the pond in his boots, watching his little brothers run around the ice and just kind of like feed him the puck, let him do this, let him do that. And he knows what's going on, and he's trying to help them out the best way he can and not waste his energy running around like they are. He's watching, and hovering. And I think that's more his game now, and it's how he feels suited to help them as long as those are his wingers. Now, granted, things have messed up a little bit this year, gotten away from that line as they've needed to try to find a way to inject some depth. And Pasternak has been hot and cold. Right now, he's red hot. I'd like to see him stop giving away the puck at the end of shifts when his line mates are gassed. I don't believe it was Marchand's fault, that second goal against St. Louis in Game 7. It was Pasternak's fault. Marchand actually made a really good play to stop Schwartz. And it was no way he was going to stop Pietrangelo following. Everybody else is at the other end of the ice. And this was Pasternak throwing a Hail Mary with 10 seconds left in the period. And everybody in Bergeron's trapped between three players in the slot. And Pasternak throws the puck up high at the final seconds of the period. Why? Why didn't you eat that puck? That's him. But you know what? Here we are, 2021-22 season, and he still does the same stuff and drives me crazy. So is he talented? Is he skilled? Can he score goals like a machine? Yes, he can. He's a great talent, but Bergeron needs to babysit still. That's just the way it is.
Okay. All right.
Well, you're going from the Lady Bing winner in obviously Bergeron to what they call the rat, I guess, in Marchand. And how does Cassidy, that you've seen, Mick, handle that situation when he's at his worst? He's getting suspended or something's going wrong. Does Cassidy have his back? Is he a little, this shouldn't be happening? Why is he doing that? That kind of thing. What have you seen from the locker room that kind of says what Cassidy thinks about Marchand in them situations?
Well, we know that Cassidy has had his back publicly, but we know that behind closed doors, it's always a different story. And if you go back to the licking incident with Ryan Callahan in the 18 playoffs, Marchand was told in no uncertain terms behind closed doors that you do that again and bye-bye. So, publicly, Cassidy said, I invited him over for dinner and I asked him about his career. And I said, is this the kind of player you want to be? Is this what you want as being your memory? You're a great player. Play up to your great playerness. Be that guy. And that's, you know what, Marchand, for the most part, this is the first season where I felt like Marchand has really regressed. I don't know what the heck happened besides the Olympics. And I know that really stuck in his craw. That one has been, he hasn't let that go. And I think that the NHL has found little ways to stick it to him, whether it's the All-Star snub or whether it's the situation with the suspension. They're not happy with him, and I think it goes back to the Panarin thing. I think that's where it really began.
All right, we're talking to Mick Colageo. He is a very knowledgeable hockey writer, and one of our common friends, Coach Bill Theodore, who coaches the Staying women's team, said, "Oh, you have a Mick Colageo? That's the encyclopedia of hockey." So I guess, and then he said, "That's for people like us who remember what an encyclopedia was. Now we just Google it." But anyway,
Coach Bill's awesome. I love Coach Bill.
Well, I see in the background, I thought that was the Chicago Stadium clock, but that's actually the Boston Garden clock, which is the clock before the clock that I remember. But before you talk about that clock, it reminds me of some things about the game. There's a big debate about baseball right now. Baseball hasn't kept up with the times. Like football's always trying to make it don't hit the quarterback. The pass interference call, they did everything right to make it offensive so that the fans really bought in. You look at the game in the 60s to now, it's probably 10 times more entertaining. Now in hockey, I think they've done a lot of things right too, emphasizing speed and all that kind of stuff. But there are a couple of things, and Chris knows where I'm going with this. I liked it back in the day when a goalie, looked like Ken Dryden. He looked like a stick figure. And if you took a shot from the point like Guy Lafleur, you had to go into a split to kick the puck out, Or if there was a pass from here to there, you had to come flying across stacking the pads. You know what I mean? To me, they've shrunk the goalie pads down a little bit. I know that they're using composite sticks. I know the skill level is higher than it was before. But to me, it's still, having a goalie going back and forth like this and just letting the puck hit him, going into the butterfly and just saying, well, I'll take my chances. I'm in the butterfly. If it hits me, fine. If it doesn't hit me, whatever. I mean, I realize they're doing a lot more than that. But I don't know. There's something about that old style game where, a couple of years back, I watched the famous Too Many Men on the Ice game playback.
Why?
Well, you know why? Because it came on and I wanted to torture myself. But I'm watching the game, right? And before it got to the miserable end, that game was unbelievable in terms of its up and down. And Gilbert is, going into splits and Ken Dryden at the other end, and they're stacking the pads and oh my God, the way and the goalie had to come out of the net and he's flopping around. And to me, it was just so much better than the goaltending now.
It's one of the greatest periods of hockey I ever seen. When the Soviet Red Army did its 1975-76 season tour, Bobby Orr had already played his 10 games with Brad Park and was now back on the shelf and unfortunately never played for the Bruins again. But during that season, the Soviet Red Army took its tour and they played that famous 3-3 tie on New Year's Eve with the Montreal Canadiens and then got throttled by the Flyers on national TV in the game where they pulled the team off the ice because they were just brutal with them. And but the game that they beat the Bruins, I think it was 5-2, but the first period of that game was one of the best things I've ever seen in my life. That's on YouTube. Make sure you find it.
All right, I got to go look for it. But what about the old style, the small pads and the goalies sliding back and forth, stacking the pads and all that? What about that?
Well, when Tabor Academy they had that New Year's tournament, and when during the lockout year 04-05, I went over there just figuring that, hey, there's a lot of hockey people who don't have anything to do, so I want to see who I'm going to run into. I ran into Ron Hextall, whose son I think was playing at Milton Academy at the time. And I asked him about his pads, and he said in the beginning of the season, his pads are like 36 inches long. This is a tall guy. And he said they shrunk by the end of the season. They were like 33, maybe 34 because they'd shrink. And I'm thinking that's all his pads are. And yet today's pads are like, 7 feet long? Now, granted, I know that they have regulations now based on a more complicated measurement of a person's body It's not so your body type actually affects it, not just your height. Here's my thing. The one thing where there's no argument and they cannot make a defense based on safety is the catching glove. The NHL catching glove is, let me pull this back. Okay. Not counting the wrist pad that goes from here to here. Okay. From this point right here up to the tip of the mitt of the web, the NHL allowance, you ready? 18 inches from here, not here, here to here. The mirror thing is killing me here. So that's your 18. Now, granted, they're not all 18 inches long, but somebody on Twitter yesterday just posted pictures of the GM12 Cooper catching glove next to an average model from today. And it's just so much bigger. These guys don't feel the puck in there. Jerry Cheevers told me he couldn't even put one of these on. He'd lose his hand in there. He wouldn't even know how. And so is there an NBA player? Is there, Bob Lanier maybe, is there anybody who could justify the size of the catching mitts today? I don't think so. For me, it's not a safety issue. I hate the ideas when people talk about let's make the nets bigger, let's make the rink bigger, just give me back the 1970s catching glove, which is already more than big enough for any NHL goaltender's hand.
What about the pads, the leg pads?
Well, I think the problem there is I'm not disagreeing with you, but anytime you get into the body parts then you get into safety arguments, and with the Players Association and lawyers and doctors and everything else. And it's very difficult for you to win that one. I think the more egregious areas for me are the Michelin Tire Man stuff that goes on up here. They actually, they're always trying something. I went to Bruins camp one year when they were still in Wilmington, and there was a glove that was on the bleachers that some manufacturer had brought in during camp that not only had the web here, it had another little web here. It never got allowed into the game, but they were pushing it. And they also had this one where the chest protector they started constructing chest protectors so that when the goalie went down into the butterfly, the chest protector still stayed up here. So it was like as high as his head. Mm-hmm. It's like, and they wouldn't allow, there are certain things that they will do anything they can to give a player a competitive edge who wants one within what the rules allow. So I think that's a tough road to win on, as much as I agree with your sentiments there. I just think that the one place they can't make an argument right now, and let's face it, the glove has become another way that the goaltenders use to take away space. That's what it's for. They hardly catch pucks anymore. They knock down pucks mostly, and that's how they play with that thing. And they use it. That's what they use it for, to take up space. And I think that needs to be taken away because nobody's got a hand big enough to justify it. And it brings you back more to what the game used to be. You're not changing the game and ruining the game. You're keeping it what it was.
Yeah, I think the measurement of the height is real important. Think about the good goalies now, Mick, in the league. Vasilevsky, you can start with him. Anderson, the kid from the Rangers now, who's really starting to get hot. And a couple of more that you could look back and say, it's guys who have really physically taken the goaltending position and become their own, whether it's in the height, whether it's in the width, whatever it is, to make their size. And like Paul says, sometimes, you go down in a butterfly and you're looking and you're saying, well, where's a spot? It's very difficult. As you said, the chest protector gets a little wider out there. The glove looks a little bit bigger. Even the blocking pad looks wide. So I think that's where he's trying to get to the point. But I also have to explain to Paul that these guys are developing a larger frame, and obviously their height helps them out in a lot of ways compared to the days of, Jerry Cheevers and some of the small league goalies, compared to them.
Yeah, Ken Dryden would not be an outlier today.
Right. Yeah. Stuff like that.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. Bill Ranford's one of the best goalies I ever saw, and when he was on, he was amazing. And he told me he cannot do the butterfly. His body won't do it. Blaine Locker, who was playing around the same time as him, or right before he came back to the Bruins, Ranford. Locker had that last year Boston Garden '95 short season, and that was his rookie year, and he played great. He showed me his butterfly in the locker room without pads on, and his legs just went, they're like U joints in them,
Yeah.
And so,
Well, Mick, let me ask you a question. You said that you were against, things like making a rink bigger. Well, obviously not making the rink bigger. Somebody said, well, maybe you can make the net a little bit bigger. And at first I thought, oh my God, don't even talk to me about making the net bigger. That's absurd. What the heck are you talking about? But then I was thinking to myself, I'm watching a game and it's like, oh, hit the crossbar. Oh, hit the post. Oh, hit the post. Oh, hit the crossbar. I'm thinking, suppose you just made the net 3 inches bigger or 2 inches bigger.
You're making it sound like there isn't going to be a competitive response to that. Everything
Well,
they ever do, there's a competitive response.
No, I know, but
the 2005 rule changes that took out the red line and allowed the 2-line pass. What's the number one play that's used for? Not a breakaway pass. The number one play that's used for is the icing tip pass. The guy stands at center ice, and the guy from behind his own net shoots a long pass to half the distance, and the guy puts his stick over center ice. It touches his stick, negates the icing, and gets it down the other end. Now the other team has to bring it up. That's the number one thing that's used for. And so I think the one thing that taking out the red line did is for 2-line purposes was it elasticized the gap. Teams used to be able to say, okay, here's your 3 forwards, here's your 2 defensemen, and you're moving a unit up and down the ice like this, really tight. Now with that ability to stretch the rink, you have to have one of them. If you let both these go back, you're in trouble. But if you let one go back, as long as you have another one who's maintaining some sense of gap, then you can. But I think that when you bring in the sticks at the same exact time, the stick revolution, everybody could propel the puck so hard, from off balance, whatever, you could flick it really fast and it turned the game into like air hockey, like a pinball. So the speed of the game, I don't see as being the athletes as much as I do the what the sticks have done to the puck movement. It's like watching.
What about like if you made the net just like 2-3 inches bigger, that wouldn't even be noticeable? Wait a minute, don't you think that there could be just a little bit more scoring?
I think the best way to compare that is by looking at the BU rink at Gannis, because what that was represented a trend away from 100-foot wide rinks like UNH and like the Olympic size, or that they used to call that. And
I'm talking about the net,
hybrid. I know,
not the rink.
I know where you're going. And I'm telling you this. The reason they thought the hybrid width rink at Aganis was the answer was because you wouldn't have a coach change his system because you're now 100 feet wide. But if you're only a little wider, you stress his present system. And that's the same thing that you're saying. I get the theory. If we could just do this much, then the same shot. No, but that's not what happens. What happens is they start going for the post over there instead of the post where it was. But the competitive response is always going to be there, and nothing ever changed. Hey, this goals were supposed to go up when they made the game so much faster in 2005 by allowing the 2-line pass and having synthetic sticks, right? So all the wood sticks disappeared, and everybody had a one piece, and the game got so much quicker. But what happened? The coaches figured out how to defend. They still figured out how to do it. They'll always figure out how to do it, because if you allow goals, you lose. If you lose your job. And that's always going to be the deal. That's why international hockey is actually slower. It's actually
Chris,
slower.
I still say you got to shrink those goalie pads down.
That's okay. If you can find a way to make that happen, I'm all for it. Because anything that brings the game back to the game that we grew up with is I'm in favor of that. I don't like morphing it out further than it is, because I feel like we're not going to get the result we want. And now what did we do?
Right. Okay.
Mick, Paul still wants those foam pads and them leather straps that we used to go around when we played street hockey. That's how old he wants to get.
Well, I'm older than that. But my first game was January 25th, 1968. John Beliveau played in it. So my point is this. if you hear anything this summer about hey, we played some experimental games with the net's only 3 inches wider, and you believe all the goals that were scored, yeah, that's fine. But give it 6 months in the NHL and see what happens. Because everything that happened at the beginning, all the chaos at the beginning of the 05-06 season, all the plays that the torpedo plays, the Swedish torpedo plays up the middle that the Ottawa Senators were making and the Buffalo Sabres, at the end of the season, nobody could make those anymore. They figured out how to defend again.
Well, remember when they had the 3-on-3 overtime, right? They've adjusted that a little bit. I mean, it's still great fun to see that.
I would like to see a to use a basketball tournament term. I would like to see a backcourt violation, because I hate seeing them waste the 3-on-3, voluntarily taking the puck out of the zone because they don't like what they see in the zone. I don't have a play now, so I'm going to walk it back out, pass it to my goalie, get our line changed, and we're going to reorganize. I feel like this is 5 minutes. If we're going to try to get a result here, let's tweak this thing and make them make a play inside the zone. If you can't get your change inside the zone, if you took the puck out of the zone, icing. You have to keep the same player on the ice.
That helps the team. That helps the offensive team that the bench happens to be close to.
Right.
So he can come right out, switch that guy quickly, get on, and then go right back in.
That's right, because you switch ends. Yeah,
that's correct, and you switch an end. So that in favors that. So that's not a bad suggestion. Mick.
I would like to see that, because I hate the delay a game that I see that's crept into the 3-on-3. That is now evolving into another thing that isn't nearly as good as it was when they first did it.
Hey, now, can you do me a favor? Can you make the tennis net a little lower so when I hit some balls, I don't keep hitting that white tape that pops out? I can get it over. Can you slide the net down a little bit for me?
I can use some of my zip ties. Every tennis official carries zip ties. I just grab a few notches up and pull down.
There you go.
Well, speaking of rule changes, right? A lot of, official reviews have come into all the sports, football and basketball, and they're debating. Well, the one that seems to be pretty irritating is that whole blue line thing where, a team goes into the zone and then they're in the zone what feels like 5 minutes, which it isn't 5 minutes. And then a goal is scored and they go, wait a minute, 5 minutes ago they were offside, Yeah. That is so absurd,
Philadelphia Flyer fans, like, where were you in 1980 when I needed you?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's fine for checking and see if the puck went over the line for a goal or something really, really big that they got to look at. But that right there's got to be some way to correct that, because it really is absurd.
Well, I think that this adjustment rule to say that now the player's skate can be over the line and not making contact with the ice.
Yes.
Yeah. The premise of that tweak was that now our video cameras can pick up, without having to ascertain ice contact. We can at least see left to right whether it had broken the plane. And I think that problem is now reinventing itself, because, like I said, players know what the new rule is, and they're already trying to take advantage of that. Yeah. So all they did was move the line. That's all they did.
Yeah, I think the one thing they could change there is, Mick, is on the play that Paul's talking about, once it goes into the zone and you finish that play, and it's a shot or whatever it is, and then it stays in the zone, and then a goal goes in, then they do it. It should be only when you can challenge for that play that just happened. So I don't know if you could actually stop it and say, wait a minute, we got a challenge because the play has now finished, instead of staying in the zone and go for another 3 minutes and all of a sudden a goal goes in. Then they go back to, well, wait a minute, when it came in. So I don't know if there's a way
to get in legally, so anything that happened in the next 7 minutes doesn't count.
Yes, and it doesn't count. Right.
Yeah, you know what? I like a lot of what you're saying there. I think that there's a lot of merit to that. I think the problem there that scares the crap out of the refs or the linesmen in this case, is what happens. That answers the play that you're talking about, but then there's going to be other plays that are a little less. There's going to be something that are going to be arguable as to whether they were continuations of what just happened, or whether they can be parsed out and say they were separate from. And who decides that? And this is the reason I don't get into the statistical craze of today. if I mention somebody's plus minus, people look at me like I'm a Neanderthal, and they'll say, yeah, but you don't know what the Corsi is, or this or that, or the shot chances, or the share opportunities, or the probabilities here, and how can you say that Matt Grizzly can't defend? All the statistics show that he's great with McAvoy. Yeah, they do until he's not. You know, I mean, my point with that stuff is that you can't. The numbers won't always get you there. You got to use your eyes sometime, and because there's certain things that'll always happen, whether they happen a lot or not, and whether they're statistically supportable or not, they guaranteed to happen at a certain point because of a set of circumstances. And that one, you know, I feel like that one there is, I feel a lot of good would have come of what you just said, Chris, but I don't know that other stuff wouldn't happen too.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Mick's illustrious career in writing sports and writing hockey in particular. We know from having spoken to you in the past that you grew up in the Boston area. When did you decide, hey, you know what? I know you're always a big hockey fan. You talked about your first game Jean Beliveau was playing. I remember Jean Beliveau hoisting the Stanley Cup in 1971. That's my first memory of Jean Beliveau. The Ken Dryden year where the Bruins broke 37 records and got bounced in the first round.
Yeah.
I remember him then in his last year. But, you know, as far as, you know, how you fell in love with the game and how that morphed into what's become a great career. And maybe you can summarize real quick in 30 seconds your career as a sports writer.
Well, I mean, as far as the hockey fascination goes, I went to Fenway before I ever went to Boston Garden. You know, so the 67 Red Sox were probably my first big disappointment. But first person to ever break my heart was Beliveau, and it was in 69, double overtime, game 6. My dad let me stay up on a school night. So that was a tough one. But yeah, Four Seasons Arena in Walpole was right up the street from where I grew up. So, which is right. It used to be, there's a Walmart there now in the gully near Route 1 and 27 where Walpole and Sharon meet. And there used to be Four Seasons Arena there, which was an old 3,000 seat dingy arena. And some of the greatest high school hockey ever played was there. I mean, that's where Robbie Fatorik played. Richie Hebner, who wound up winning the World Series with the Pittsburgh Pirates in 71. I saw him play high school hockey in the mid 60s there. And, you know, he could have been with the Bruins. There was a lot of great hockey played there. You know, obviously Millbury with the Walpole, last really good Walpole team before they started going to the Catholics. But that was great hockey. Norwood. In fact, later tonight, the 1972 Norwood High State champions are being feted in Norwood, and I'm going to go see that event, which will be nice at the new Boston Skating Club rink on University. So, but yeah, I was always fascinated with the hockey, and you know what? I really wanted to be the radio guy. That was what I wanted. I wanted to be a radio. I wanted to be Bob Wilson's successor. That was what I really wanted to do.
I'm a fan of Fred Cusick. That's what I started doing the high school play-by-play.
That Paul Santos, he's a going concern.
No, but every once in a while, I find myself using a phrase that was a Fred Cusick kind of thing, and most people now wouldn't even notice it. You know,
here we go. Everybody who's older knows what that means, right?
Don Earl, puck is loose.
That means Cashman just dropped the gloves with Magnuson. But that was the dream job for me. I wound up getting my first journalism job as a career changer in '86. And it was a sports writing job in a weekly. I still tried to get in the radio thing. I had a lot of radio jobs, a lot of opportunities, but boy, the money was horrible during the recession then. And so I wound up going back to the safe confines of the newspaper world, and found out in the process that I really enjoyed writing, and that I was better at it than I ever dreamed I would be. And that it was very fulfilling, and probably more so than had I gone the play-by-play route. Because if you do that, you're not really media. You're really you're really working for the club. And I realized because I'm obviously somebody who's always been full of opinions, that, you know, in the Standard Times encouraged me to write. I met Steve DaCosta, who was then sports editor, back in '95. When he was going to see Jim Calhoun, for whom he had played hoops at Westport High School, speak at a sports writers thing. And I was just going from Rhode Island where I was working. I was a sports editor of the Narragansett Times. And I went up there just because I needed to circulate. And we met. and that's how I started writing the Bruins for the Standard Times. And then they needed somebody in the office. They needed a full-time staffer 5 years later, and John Comey, showed my resume to Dave Cuddy and said, "Hey, why don't we get this guy?" And I owe these guys my life, because the Standard Times is the only job I've ever had that I really wanted to be my last one.
So, Mick, you like freelancing now? Where are you specifically in the area?
Yeah, I'm the editor of the. Believe it or not, I'm the editor of the Wanderer.
Oh, the Wanderer. Okay.
Then the covers the tri-towns of Merriam, Mattapoisett, Rochester, and they needed a news editor, and Jean Perry just needed a change in her life from the grind of that. And John Comey, once again, former Standard Time sports editor, mutual friend, put me onto it. And because the Standard Times, after my job got changed there several times since 2014, they finally laid me off Memorial Day weekend of 19. And so then in February 2020, the Wanderer hired me, and I've now for 2 years been the news editor of the Wanderer. So I'm doing things I never in my life thought I would do. I cover municipal government. I know about things now that I never paid any attention to in my life. It's been like a free graduate degree. As you know, in newspapers going down the toilet as an industry, I was doing better in my life financially 15 years ago than I am now. So for me, and with the cost of living, I've continued to work. And so I still will throw Laurie Loss, my good friend at the Standard Times, some Bruins columns that you just referenced, and maybe even cover a little high school playoffs for them if the dates fall right. So I do that. Right. So that's my deal.
Well, you mentioned radio. You want to get into radio. Did you ever have an opportunity to do any play-by-play, at any level during your career?
Yeah. I called a Providence College URI men's basketball game from the Civic Center for URI radio, which was pretty good signal down there, and a few other games for them. And then I also got to do some high school hockey. John Parenti, Pete Shepard hooked me up with John Parenti. Pete Shepard's been my greatest career advocate throughout my whole time, and he's a great friend of mine, for a long time now. And but he hooked me up with John Parenti at the West Warwick station, and I actually got to call the game where Tollgate High School defeated Mount St. Charles during the 88-89 season. They beat them in a game at Thayer Arena in Warwick. Amazing hockey game, and I got to call that game. And so Dave Shea liked my tape, Bob Wilson liked my tape, Frank Cusick liked my tape, Tom Larson liked my tape. I just didn't have it in me, like a guy who was similarly slugging it out at the time, my friend John Wallach, to just continue batting, beating my head against that wall. I probably could have found my way. I don't know where I'd be right now. Maybe Muskegon, doing the IHL or something. I don't know. But
right. Well, I got to tell you, Chris and
I like the play-by-play. That was fun.
Well, Chris and I still both do a lot of high school play-by-play. Chris does more football and basketball. He does some hockey. My favorite thing is the Dartmouth Stang game when they play and that 1,000 people are in the Headland. And
isn't that great?
Isn't it? It's really.
I'm sorry I missed the last one. Dartmouth really turned the tables, didn't they?
Yeah. Well, I think Stang is in that Catholic conference, but they put him in the lower tier a little bit, so it's not their fault. If you're obviously Kenny always loves to make a tough schedule, but I think he really didn't have a lot of control over that. So a lot of those teams that they've played probably weren't as challenging as they could have been. In fact, you can make the argument that Dartmouth might be the toughest team they played all year. So
and
that might be playing the record, But what will it in our closing moments? What do you think it would take for? I mean, they made the tournament. They got rid of the South section and all that.
Yeah.
So like looking at Dartmouth and Stang, the teams down here that have any kind of shot to get hot or whatever. I mean, Dartmouth came within one game of getting to the South final, actually winning the South final against Hanover. But, once you get to the Hanovers and the Scituates and these teams, but the teams down here ever really, I mean, how would the sun and the moon and the stars have to line up before a Dartmouth and a Stang could, compete for a state championship?
Well, we saw it in 2005. The Dartmouth had a wonderful core of upper echelon talent with Billy Rocha at center. And
the Stang you're talking about.
Yeah, Stang. I'm sorry. Stang with Rocha in the middle, and boy, I don't know why my brain's doing this to me right now, but Clark on defense, terrific team. But they weren't deep, and none of our teams down here are deep. Our best players are great, but our teams are not deep. And you always go up against. Now, granted, when this thing went in 05 to what we now call TD Garden, they lost to Marlborough, which at the time had a player who made the NHL. So,
yeah, right.
I mean, every time he scored a goal, now I think he came out of retirement. Now he's playing again for the Worcester team in the East ECHL, and so Butler, Bobby Butler. So and then very similarly, another team that Eric Labonte was involved with, head coach this time, ORR a few years back, had a terrific team, and they went to the Garden and they gave a team that was much deeper than them, and they had wicked injuries, so they were playing an 8th grader on defense in the Garden. I don't know if that's ever happened. So that to me was the epitome of high school hockey in our area. We get brilliance, but we don't get it in great numbers.
Mick, let's finish up with the NHL and the Bruins take some good teams, obviously, in the East. And if you look at it right now, the Bruins would have to play like Florida or Carolina. One, tell us a little bit of the difference between regular season hockey and playoff hockey, what you think. And number two, who do you like to come out of the East to take over right now? Does it still go through Tampa, or some other teams have a chance?
Well, I think taking away Tampa's whole third line, plus you have now. Granted, those are short seasons, so I don't think you have full Stanley Cup hangover effect here. But I do think that Tampa has more energy than your typical Stanley Cup champion in a defending situation. So that's hard to predict their demise. However, I do feel like they seem a little more vulnerable now than what I remember. And if there was a team that was going to topple that, I feel like it could be any one of 4. I like Washington if they can get a defenseman at the deadline, but then there's a team that needs something. Mm-hmm. I think Pittsburgh needs something, but I think that's another team that's still scary. I think that Florida has played some really good hockey, but I don't believe in their defense, and I'm not anticipating a move with their team. And if they don't make a move, I don't like them in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Carolina's, I think, is a little scarier because I think that when they came in and taught Boston a lesson recently, that looked to me like a team that was ready for a playoff run. They did not look to me like a team that was just trying to outquick the Bruins like they did in 19 and get swept by them. That team looked to me like a team that could out-hit you. They could bully you like Svechnikov up front. That guy's a truck. I like the defense now. I just think they're knocking on the door. I don't know if they got enough, but they're the team that I think right now, as presently constituted, is the scariest challenge to the Lightning. Well, I left over. I didn't even talk about Toronto. Every year, I wonder if Toronto is just going to be Toronto's year.
Nobody talks about Toronto.
Well,
every year they bypass them.
I don't like to pile on because sooner or later this whole thing is gonna end and they're gonna make a run because they're too good. But is it going to happen right now? I have no idea. I don't know how to measure that.
Well, after having heard this analysis, I feel much more depressed about all the
teams
the Bruins. The Bruins have to go through. They have to go through either 1, 2, or 3 of those teams that you just summarized right there.
All right. So, how many teams have you ever heard of that won the Stanley Cup? That the 3 of the best 5 players are wingers.
I can't recall.
Even if you tried to say the Chicago Blackhawks and their 3 and during the cap era, then you would have to include Patrick Sharp. And the only year that you could put him in that 3, justify an argument, he actually didn't play. He played second line center. That was 2010.
Well, I don't know if you picked the headline here, but I was just looking at the Standard Times article that appeared on Thursday. And it says right here, and as soon as I picked this up, I thought, oh boy, Bruins meandering season not worth saving by Mick Colageo. Now, did you write that headline?
Ooh.
Or is that an accurate?
That kind of sounds like mine, but I'm not sure if it got tweaked.
Seems a little harsh.
Yeah, you know what? I think I started out thinking Bruins season can still be saved, but then I thought to myself, they're not going to go get Matthias Ekholm. They're not going to go get Asa Lindell. If I was the Bruins, I would consider blowing this thing up.
Well, that's what Milbury said. Milbury said that. I couldn't believe it.
But I wouldn't. But I'm not talking Marchand or Bergeron. I'm talking about Pasternak, because I feel like he gives the opponent. I feel like he's the one way, the one ticket you have to fix this. Because who wants Taylor Hall's contract? I know I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do now?
But, he coughs up the puck. He does. He coughs up the puck. You're talking about that home run pass where they blamed Marchand and
for the line change. Yeah, he actually was gassed and he stopped Schwartz.
Yeah,
Pasternak's he's still doing that stuff.
He's sloppy with the puck, but then I think back to all those years where the Bruins couldn't find anybody to put the puck in the net. Like, it's hard to replace those 35 or 40 goals.
That's why they're so patient with him. That's why they've been so stay with this guy. That's why
you still get rid of him.
Would I? I mean, right. Well, something, to make the deal that you have to make to win hurts. They got rid of Blake Wheeler on the cusp of the 2011 Stanley Cup, and they don't regret it because they won. Now, granted, if I didn't feel good about the team, I wouldn't do it. But I'm not married to having 3 elite wingers on my team when I only have one really great center and he's 36, and I have a very young defense and I have no ability to shut down on the left side when it gets heavy. What's my pathway? I got to get a left side defenseman. Who am I going to get? So that's why I thought I'd only do it if I could knock it out of the park. If I could get like Jamie Benn, Asa Lindell would be my left side defenseman. I'd change the culture up front by having a guy who was going to be a bulldozer out there, who's still got a lot left, in my opinion, even though he's into his 30s. I just feel like what you do has to hurt. I mean, my preference would be to move Taylor Hall, but I don't think they can. So I try to just confine my remarks to what I think is more likely to happen. And more likely to happen is the Bruins are going to probably try to get some defensive help, and it'll probably be more of a depth kind of a move, because they don't want to pay the price that you have to pay in order to compete. And I'll tell you something else. People have brought up the idea that maybe Don Sweeney will do something desperate because he might not be renewed next year or whatever. Right now, I can tell you this. We've all watched Don Sweeney's entire career from when he was a player at Harvard, right? Mm-hmm. He will never put the team himself ahead of the team. Never. Mm-hmm. He never has. He won't now. So I look at it and I say they're going to stay the course here. And maybe that's the right move. And Bergeron comes back, and then you do things differently next year. You get better. I think that
hey, Chris. Yep. Remember in football, the Cincinnati Bengals, they kind of came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they're in the Super Bowl. Like, hey, that's the thing about sports. You never know. And in the NHL, I mean, was there ever a league that was made for upsets but the NHL? I mean,
no, Cinderella doesn't win the cup though in the NHL.
Right. They knock somebody off and then they get beat.
They screw it up for somebody else. I mean, look at the Lightning a few years ago when they had that record. It was the best one since the late 70s Canadians. Right?
Yep. Yeah. How far you think they can go, Mick? Last question for me. How far you think the Bruins can go?
I think they can
make a move, and maybe if they do make a move, round.
I think they can pull a couple upsets here. I wouldn't rule it out. I think that what you said about the Stanley Cup playoffs goes for the Bruins too. Yep. They could galvanize like 91-92 season. Now, granted, they're not going to get 3 Olympians and a junior scorer to come up at the end of the season and help them right now. But there's a team that with the right move could suddenly screw it up for some teams. Do I think they can go all the way? No, not like this.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your analysis. Hey, between you, of course, with your vast hockey knowledge, Chris is a big hockey fan. I'm a big hockey fan. We did 1 hour. We could talk for 5 hours without a problem because it is so much fun. We really would love to have you maybe come back during the playoffs to see how the Bruins are doing. Maybe the Bruins will be in the semifinals or something. I mean, Pittsburgh is more likely to be there than the Bruins, but
maybe we'll have a big trade to talk about.
There you go.
All right, Mick. Hey, thank you very much for being with us. That was a fun, quick hour, and we really appreciate your insight on all the hockey.
Thank you guys for having me. The local guys around here is the greatest thing about my career, and knowing all of you and all my hockey coaches and tennis coaches. It's just been fantastic. Even the football coaches like Coach White, it's just been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Mick.
Well, we really appreciate that. Thank you very much, Nick. Mick. Yeah, hey, we had a perfect hour right till then. Thank you very much, Mick. And for Chris Santos, I'm